All right, Fern. Today we're actually going to do it. We've got the topic at
Sounded
hand,
terrible.
and we're gonna and we're gonna actually talk about it. What do you think?
Yeah.
You think we can manage that?
Well, as long as you stay on task.
I've got to keep you. I'm basically like the Magellan of this ship. It's going.
Magellan.
You're like the
You should
wind.
you should read up on Magellan first and foremost.
I don't know. He
Secondly,
was the first explorer that came to mind.
secondly, that podcast went sideways because you on multiple occasions just we'll talk about coaching and I'll wrap this up for everybody. On multiple occasions you're like, "All right, just two more questions."
Yeah, just two more.
Just one more question. Just like when a coach is like, "One more rep, everybody." Never the fucking case.
Would, would you consider yourself a history buff?
No, not really. No. My dad is though.
Ask your dad what book or movie ideally I should watch. So while we're in this quarantine, I'm trying to, not let my brain go to complete mush and learn a little bit. So I've been watching this course on YouTube about history, but I would like to learn more.
I
So I guess if the listeners,
he'll probably say Patton about General
okay,
Patton.
yeah,
And then what else would he say?
I'm looking
Um,
more for like a movie than a book. I should make clear.
that is a movie, but you're
Okay,
welcome. Yeah.
okay. So Patton's a movie about,
Yeah.
and who's that about?
So you're not a history buff either, is what you're saying. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to
If
think of
if
what
any of the
else.
listeners have ideas for me, also please hit us up.
Not
I do want to
necessarily
learn
history, but like he's a big fan of Papillon. Like he really likes that movie.
the tequila.
No. So again, illustrating that you are not in any way a history buff or fucking in on
No,
old movies.
I truly am terrible when it comes to history. It's one of those subjects I did not like growing up, but as I'm reading more about different, periods of time, and I read a lot about like the Roman Empire and Stoicism, it's got me curious at least. But I think the challenge with history, I don't know if we have any history teachers that listen, it's kind of boring. Like it's never presented. You'll watch some great documentaries and then be like, man, if they would have showed us this in school, I definitely would have paid attention.
I think it depends on how you look at it, right? So I think if you look at it in terms of, if you look at through the lens of history tends to repeat itself, then it becomes a little bit more interesting. So if you can read about historical things that happened that had a significant ability to alter the course of mankind or civilization, then it becomes way more interesting because then you start thinking about what's the next variation of this or how would this happen again, like what's probably on everybody's mind, like stuff about the Great Depression, like people are worried about that kind of stuff happening again. So if you start reading stuff like that, then you find these parallel themes and stuff like that. So
I'm
yeah, I
always
think
impressed with a few things when it comes to history. I mean, mostly right now, what I'm always trying to wrap my head around is, information spreads so fast right now. But back in the day, people would like, I was thinking about something, I was reading something, I forget what it was, and it was like this one guy had to go tell this other guy something, and it was really important. I'm like, wow, he actually had to probably hop on his horse and go right over to this dude's house. Like there was no other way to tell him anything.
that's definitely how that worked. Yeah. So
Well, or then put that in perspective with Corona and everything going on. It's like so much information and how fast it was is because of the internet. What about what happened with the Spanish flu? It's like how would people even find out that we need to social distance and isolate and all that stuff?
when they got sick, and then usually it would be delayed, so everybody would be sick, and they're like, the Spanish flu is here, and they're like, oh, that's why people are dying. Got it.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me. So, hey, if anybody's got some ideas, I'd love to hear them. But we are here to talk about the topic at hand, and that is front rack mobility. So when I say that term, front rack mobility, what do you immediately think of, and what does it mean to you?
A common pain point for both CrossFit coaches and athletes.
Which is it more painful for?
Physically or emotionally?
Well, exactly, right? So, and so one, just let's be a little more clear. Let's explain. Front rack mobility typically refers to your ability to keep your hands on a barbell with your elbows up while the barbell lays across your shoulders. So
While potentially going through range of motion.
even more important, right? So think about the front squat, think about your squat clean, your thruster, even, that position. Now, I think what you're saying, Fern, is for the athletes, we realize, hey, this position isn't the most comfortable. And two, for coaches, we have to deal with the athletes saying that, complaining about it, and then oftentimes, if not most of the time, not really wanting to do anything about it.
Yeah, probably. I mean, this is always like, you want to throw everything on the athlete, but so yes and no. So maybe they don't want to, or don't prioritize it, right? So this kind of goes back to that, like, hey, don't say you don't have time. Don't say it's not a priority. For most people, like improving their front rack should not be a priority. Like they just have more important things to do in life. If it continues to be a topic of discussion and something that tends to cause friction between you and that athlete, and it's clearly causing them frustration, now we probably need to make it a priority.
Well, let's take a step back. Even prior to you coaching people on this, you were an athlete. I mean, let's not overlook the fact you're a Division I basketball player,
It is.
multi-time regional athlete.
Speaking of that, I was listening to the Leiden episode the other day. I was like, man, Z and we should get together and just,
What, you want to reminisce about your sectional days?
well, both. But he played basketball too.
Oh, you guys, yeah, you just have so much in common, you
We're
know.
both taller, better looking, and smarter than you as well. So there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
for us to
mean,
discuss.
if there was anything to bond over, it'd be those three things.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
but my question to you is, do you remember the first time you were put into this position?
the front rack.
Yeah, because if you were like me when you grew up, a lot of squatting, sissy squatting, leg press, like a typical leg day. But whenever I did front squat, which wasn't that often, it was, the typical I dream of Genie position.
So I'm unique in the sense that no, I don't remember that because I was fortunate enough to be exposed to some pretty high level strength and conditioning coaches throughout my athletic career. So, like for instance, so Gail Hatch was a very prominent weightlifting coach in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for years and years and years and years. So a lot of folks in the strength and conditioning world came up around him, and then so I spent some time with him as well as spent time underneath coaches who trained under him. So when I was introduced to Olympic lifts in their basic form, primarily power variations of them, very very early, like like late, probably like middle school. So it was never foreign to me. And then when I got to college, my strength and conditioning coach, one of them was a guy named Doc Murdoch, and the other one was a gentleman named Kurt Wolfolk, whose daughter Natalie Wolfolk was an Olympian and who is now married to Coach Bergner's son. So again, more and more and more exposure to Olympic lifting. So from that aspect, no, I don't remember because it was 30 years ago. So
But basically what you're trying to say is you were put in this front rack position a lot earlier than most and probably a lot more often than most.
correct, and that's why I wanted to answer that honestly, not to be like, oh, look at my background, but to realistically say no, I don't remember that because it was just, again, I was fortunate to be around people who were very very um, probably like ahead of their time is probably a good way to describe that. They were doing some really cool stuff 30 years ago. So
So, and truthfully, I don't remember mine either. I know even when I was growing up, I did some, at least my interpretation of cleans and stuff. So I was probably put into that position more. So I don't know about you, but I wouldn't say I have the best front rack mobility, but it's never been a complete struggle for me. What about for you?
no, I mean mine's front rack is fine. Like I can do a full grip on the bar with elbows high. Now where I tend to struggle might be a little bit is like thoracic, maybe extension, or like trying to keep a flat back in that position. I tend to have a little bit uh, maybe how would I describe it? Like an aggressive kind of like kyphotic curve of my thoracic spine. So sometimes it looks like my back's rounded, but that's probably just my posture.
Do you think that's your posture or military? I see when at level ones, when I see someone with a little more of a rounded upper back, oftentimes they're military.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a blanket statement, but and I didn't spend a ton of time like under load, like wearing a ton of. I mean, I did for a couple of years, but like wearing body armor stuff like that, but not enough to give me that posture. That I think a lot of that is just my posture.
So when we think about front rack mobility, most people immediately go to the thought that it's something to do with their wrists.
Generally, not the case. So a quick test as far as to determine whether it's the wrist or not is just have people put their palms together. Like basically give yourself a high five and then leave your palms together and then pull your elbows up as high as you can. So like what you need a minimum is 90 degrees. So this would kind of look like a little genie pose, kind of, right? Like
Yeah,
with your
like
hands
you're
like that,
praying,
like
like prayer hands.
correct, yeah. So prayer hands, but not interlaced fingers, and then just pull your elbows up. So if
Who prays
obviously you
with
can't see the
interlaced fingers? No one.
like this,
Do they?
little
You ever pray
kids,
like that?
yeah. Well, you're a little,
Oh, like
you're a child. You should do this, yeah,
every night I cross my
yeah.
fingers and I kneel by my bed and I pray that Fern is in a good mood on our podcast and that
And
he's nice to me.
clearly you're not praying hard enough because it doesn't work. But basically, you guys can see what I'm saying, because if you pull your elbows up at 90 degrees is the requirement at the wrist to get into front rack position. So I have more than that, obviously. You have less.
Yeah, so Fern
Um,
is demonstrating his
Superiority. Yeah,
for those of you that couldn't see it.
yeah. So if they can get to 90 degrees, and if you don't even want to do that, just have them get into a plank position and a push-up. And if their wrist and forearm are at 90 degrees, like that's the requirement. Typically it's not the wrist. People say the wrist because it's generally the site of discomfort or the point of discomfort, not necessarily the point of restriction.
Yeah, I mean,
So
at level ones, when someone kind of just throws out there, I can't do this. I always ask, can you do a push-up? That doesn't mean you can do a front rack, but it means it's not your wrists.
mhm.
So let's kind of work our way up the chain. I mean, we typically see this in the front squat, and I do want to talk about the use of PVC at the level ones versus barbells, and I think that'll kind of lend itself to ways to improve. But if it's not the wrist, where have you found for most people that it kind of begins? Where does their tightness really? What is the root of it?
Probably a toss-up between the lat and the tricep. They just physically struggle to bring that, without movement of their midline, struggle to bring the upper arm of the humerus parallel to the floor without overextending or something like that. And a quick test is basically just put your thumbs on your shoulders and drive your elbows straight forward. If you can do that, yeah, without making that stupid face that you're making,
My
if you
right
can
one,
do
I
that,
can't get my. I think could it potentially be just? Is it my bicep is too big?
that's definitely not it. Yeah, probably just bad genetics. So
Bad,
yeah, that's
bad. I got the
yeah.
recessive trait for front
Just
rack
weak,
mobility.
weak genes. We're like twins. Where I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger and you're Danny DeVito.
Yeah, exactly. You
um,
have all the best mobility,
that's right.
Division
Yep.
One
The
basketball
looks. I'm
player.
tall. Yep. No, but yeah. So that's just a quick tip, and that's how they teach in the CrossFit Kids course too. Is just put your hands on your thumbs on your shoulders and drive the elbows up. That'll give you a pretty good idea. Now that doesn't account for actually getting into extension at the wrist and placing a barbell there, obviously, but it'll kind of give you a little bit of insight into potentially what you're going to be seeing. If somebody can't physically put their thumbs on their shoulders and drive their elbows up, probably going to be a rough day when you put a barbell in the front rack position.
So, okay, if they can get their thumbs there, how are we determining if it's triceps versus lats?
I have a counter question, which is I don't know that it matters.
Fair enough, right? If you can't do it, does it matter why you can't do it, or are you going to get better at it? Um,
The
no,
chances are probably both, but sometimes this is I don't
I'd
know
say
how to
more just
describe
for
this.
those that are curious, like, hey, which
Yeah, I
is it?
mean,
Like, I know,
it could be either or. And my point with this is where some people kind of what I would describe as like they kind of leave their swim lane or their area of expertise, and they start talking about stuff that is not necessarily in their wheelhouse. They start using body parts incorrectly and saying things that probably fall more in line with a physical therapist or somebody who kind of lives their life in sports medicine. And so from a coaching standpoint, like it doesn't matter. Like our job is to get them into a better position while recognizing the degree of restriction so that you can craft a plan that allows you to get the appropriate amount of improvement for today. And that might just be trying harder. It might not actually mean any improvement in the position.
So let's bring it to the level ones, and let's kind of start there as the foundation. We have a squat breakout group. We review the air squat for typically 25, 30 minutes, and then we dive into the front squat. And this is where people, really start to feel it. It's challenging. If you've never front squatted with PVC, it's really eye-opening. So let's kind of go through some of the common questions or statements. And one is, can I just add some load?
You could. So there's nothing to say that adding some form of resistance is a bad thing. I just think a lot of people would like to go there way too quickly. It's like, I just need a barbell. It's like, I'm not saying a barbell wouldn't help you get there. Probably would. Is that solving the problem is the question.
So based on that, why do you think CrossFit to this day uses PVC at the level ones?
For a couple reasons. Number one, it's just easier from a teaching standpoint. So if we think about the practicality of just giving everybody a barbell, how long are you really going to be able to hold anybody in a position? To get some, to develop kinesthetic awareness, right? To start to have them actually feel positions without
Right, they're
having a
going to
mental
be
breakdown.
tired
Yeah.
before they lose positions.
Right. So you can get time under tension with a PVC pipe. It just takes a little bit longer, but that's the beauty of it. The other reason I think is that if we're going to work on technique, I really would prefer to do that because it is a learning environment. That's what the level one is for. Which, by the way, the first online level one launches this coming weekend. Or is it this weekend? Is it this?
It's soon.
No, 2 weeks. Yeah, it's soon. Which they did an incredibly fast turnaround on that. I mean, I think they did the whole thing in like 10 days. But go check it out. And that is for revalidates for level ones and level twos only. It's not for first timers. So just FYI. It's a learning environment, so I want to work on technique. And typically, if I'm going to work on technique, or if I'm going to practice, if we're thinking about like the difference between training and practice, typically practice is absent of intensity, which would look like load, speed. That's how I want to do it. I don't want to have to worry about people getting tired underneath the barbell. I want them to focus on positions and doing it correctly, just like you would anywhere. That's kind of always the, why do we use PVC pipes? And that fun. And now that I'm thinking about this, like this is a good counter argument to that fundamental piece of using a PVC pipe for 2 days is the counter argument to CrossFit doesn't care about technique.
Right. I mean, I've heard flow masters or other trainers kind of say that, like CrossFit gets this bad reputation about wanting intensity immediately. And for those that have taken the level one, the most you can work out is 18 minutes.
The most.
Yeah. And if you're
Across 2
doing that,
days, you did everything wrong. Yeah.
right. Something's going wrong if you're doing that. But,
And actually, I mean, that's if you were to count the med ball. But really, the most you're going to work out under load is 10 minutes, maybe.
oh yeah, I just meant more so of actually, 3, 2, 1, go
Yeah.
training.
Yeah,
And then
while we're doing 5 hours or roughly 5 hours of technique work, the practice.
yeah, and for those that have taken their level one and or level two, you realize how devastating PVC can be. Most people show up on Sunday incredibly sore, and it's not from the one workout they did. It's from holding those static positions and moving slowly with PVC.
And Coach Bergner's course is no different. I mean, it's 2 days of PVC pipe work with people just getting demolished with a PVC pipe.
And for reference, our mutual friend Austin Maliolo has spoken about the most he's ever improved his snatch in one period of time was when he was only using PVC and just drilling the hell out of it. So, and that's
Weird.
someone with a 200. I think his best is 245 plus. So I mean, it's not like he went from 65 to 95. He's you're talking he's already got 4 plates on the barbell.
I'm pretty sure he snatches more than that too. So I mean, he's not weak, and everybody knows that. Like Austin's a great athlete. So
And he's also
yeah,
not big compared to, those snatching
yeah. I mean,
315 have 20 pounds on him.
he's got a 7 foot wingspan on somebody who's 5'5". But the which is funny, him and Austin I think actually do have the same wingspan. But the so yeah, no, yeah, that's why we use it in the level one, and it's also one of these things where you can really figure out if people fundamentally understand the movement.
So let's talk about, we're seeing people poor front rack mobility, right? So when someone says that to you, what immediately goes through your head and what are your immediate first steps?
So what do they say?
Either something to the extent of I can't do that,
I can't
or
do it. Got it.
yeah, I've got, I've just got poor mobility. That's a very blanket statement,
Mhm.
but we hear it a lot.
So the first thing is just check to see if they're even set up for success. So I can't do that, and then I might look at their hands and maybe the grip width is either too wide or too narrow. So typically if you're looking at movement, go with the low hanging fruit, check hands, check feet. Like if I find an error in either one of those two, that's an easy fix. So in addition to grip width, then I'm going to look at the actual grip of the hands. And typically, I don't know who I heard this from recently. We always say we want a loose fingertip grip, but somebody, I don't remember who it was. So I can't give credit for it, but
It was
they
me.
basically said,
Was it
probably
good?
not.
Was it smart?
No. Yes, it was, but it wasn't you. But it basically said, hey, just put your fingerprints on the bar.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good cue.
Yeah. So they said put your fingerprints on the bar because typically you say you'll tell people to have a loose grip on the bar, but they still have like a bunch of knuckles on the bar,
Yeah, and I'll say something
which will
like
restrict
last
that.
knuckle or whatever, but that's a
Yeah,
good one. Fingerprint on the bar.
yeah. It might have been Maggie, but anyway, so look at that. So look at grip width, and then look at the grip they have on the bar, and if there's something that can be adjusted there, just go there, and at bare minimum we can have something that's better. So then once I go there, then I'm just going to ask them to work a little bit harder, and typically I'm going to get, I couldn't quantify it, but a noticeable change in front rack position just by doing those two things.
So I have a couple questions for you about that. Let me ask you this first. What would be your definition of truly having bad front rack mobility? In other words, a lot of people say that, but it's like, but you can front squat. So what is it? Where are we where it's like, okay, you truly do have bad mobility?
Well, the obvious one is injury. So and honestly, like I probably couldn't even count on one hand, like to 5, the number of people that I've had to physically put in the I Dream of Jeannie, like arms crossed. One of them was a motorcycle accident who had when I like no flexion or extension of the wrist, like
Right, like
that.
fused almost.
Yeah, so that one was obvious. Outside of that, most people can get into it, but the limiting factor then becomes what would very much resemble safety related. So like they can get into it and they can do something that resembles a front squat, which we want to do. But once we add load, it doesn't matter what the load is. Now it gets a little dicey, right? Because they struggle to stay in a good position.
Well,
Um,
and that goes back to what you said earlier. It's not just about having this, but actually having it while moving through a range of motion. But then the follow-up to that would be, well, is it the maturity of their squat? Is it, something you mentioned earlier, like the rounding of an upper back? Like it's not necessarily, it's easy to just attribute it to poor front rack mobility, but in reality, it could be so many other factors that we're not considering.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. And so then this is as a trainer, and I probably have mentioned this before, but you have to try to figure out a way to make some sort of assessment with regard to how much am I going to get out of this right now? And if you can't look at a front squat and quickly come to the realization that they are not going to get their elbows all the way up today, and that's fine. It's unrealistic to have that expectation, but I could get them a little bit better today, and by making them work a little bit more, that's okay. That's nothing wrong with that. Like that's good coaching. So figure out what you're going to get and try to get that, even if it is 1 degree of improvement, and then celebrate it. But there's a difference between front rack if I'm pressing overhead versus front rack if I'm going into hip flexion for something like a front squat. If they struggle in their squat and they are in something that resembles this immature squat where the torso is severely cantilevered forward, then yeah, they're going to have issues in the front rack position. And in that scenario, even with great front rack position, you're still not in a good position. Like you could have your elbows parallel to the floor, but if I have to sit all the way back, now I have to ask for extreme range of motion in order to keep my elbows or my forearm, my upper arm parallel to the floor.
Well, yeah, and really what you're saying is it's not at that point bad front rack mobility. It's
No,
just
not at
bad,
all.
it's bad either
It's a poor
movement
squat
pattern.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a poor squat position that leads to not necessarily a poor front rack position, but to what it would better be described as just an inefficient position in general. You know,
So when you're at your level ones and we're coaching, what percentage of people would you say
I
truly
forgot what
have?
that's like because of coronavirus. I don't even
That's true.
know.
It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah.
But what percentage would you say truly have some sort of mobility issue versus they just need to work harder?
It'd be hard to put like a percentage on that, but here's what I'll tell you: the vast majority of people could just work harder and they would get significant improvement in their position. And this is more evident at the level 2 than anything because, for instance, a participant will be teaching the front squat and they will make the assumption that Johnny has poor front rack position. And I think we may have talked about this in the episode about being relentless. And they'll just turn around without making an attempt to improve the position and say, he's just got poor front rack position because Johnny said he had poor front rack position. I said, well, did you try to improve it? Like you have to, there is kind of like a, don't pass go scenario here, which is like, you have to try first. Once you've exhausted everything within your toolbox, then we could probably come to the reasonable conclusion that they have poor front rack position.
Yeah, and we can't, and that goes for so many things, especially at the level twos, like you're mentioning, where people are just like, that's how they move. It's like, then fix it.
That doesn't mean it's
Like,
okay.
yeah, it's this unique
That's
dilemma
like
where it's
somebody
like,
who drives terribly and they're driving on the wrong side of the road. And they're like, well, that's
hey,
just how they drive. And I'm
that's
like,
how they
well, this
drive.
is America. Yeah, we drive on the right side of the road here, not the left side. Like you're going to have to fix that.
I would put the percentages as relatively high in my experience, like
Yeah. Hmm.
70%. I would say it's mostly just like, no, you need to drive those elbows up harder. Now, we've talked about two fingertips, like your fingerprints on the bar. At what point do you tell people to go 3, 4, or even a full grip? And when you're front squatting, what's your opinion on two fingers versus full grip with load?
I think some of that depends on the squat position. So if you have 2 fingers and you're somebody who looks more like a immature squat, 2 fingers is going to get a little suspect. But if you're somebody who's fairly upright, then you could probably throw 3, 4 fingers, maybe even a full grip underneath the bar. So there's a lot of pieces involved here. So I think overall context matters. In the context of this movement, where should we be? What's the safest, most optimal position? Not necessarily like this is what it should be. This is always what it should be. That's just kind of bad coaching. That's me having read a textbook about front squat, but never having dealt with any athletes. Like, yes, I understand that's what it should look like. But with this athlete right here, based on their movement, their anthropometrics, how they're moving, then that's not the answer. It might be 4 fingers and it might be something that looks like their elbows a little bit down because that allows them to keep the bar on in the front rack safely.
Yeah, I think, first of all, when I front squat with load, I try to get my full grip on the bar. It feels more stable, stronger. And then, if it's a big set or if it's a Metcon that's got 21 reps, sometimes by, rep 13, 14, 15, my fingers are popping off. But
Well, yeah, because the bar will start to slide down the
yeah,
torso a little bit,
it's more work. It's more challenging to keep those elbows up. But on a heavy set, you have to. We talk about midline and then also just the frontal plane. The bar needs to sit as high as possible. The closer to that frontal plane, the more successful you're going to be and the easier it's going to be. So if you're looking at someone with poor front rack mobility, we've established, hey, they're working hard, but they struggle to get their elbows up. Like you've said, doesn't necessarily matter tricep or lats. What are some of the courses of action we can take to improve it?
something that can help. Typically, this will help with the gentleman more often than not, but it's typically the gentleman or the big offenders. Is I'll adjust the grip width. Typically, it'll be something that's wider. Sometimes it's narrower, but typically it'll be something that's wider. And then I'll test it and retest it. So I'll watch them move. Not happy with that. Just the grip. Still not happy with it. Hey, widen up your hands. Okay, that's better. Let's try that, and let's stay here for a little bit, and pair that with like working a little bit harder. So that's typically like the first couple steps in order to get somebody to a better front rack position. And then there are some kind of like tricks, if you will, with the PVC pipe to just start in a better position.
So, like what? What would be some of the?
Again, I would love to give credit here, but I don't know where I learned this.
Uh,
So
just
if you
if you're
were
unsure, probably
just give
probably
you
from me.
credit. Yeah. If you were to take a PVC pipe and just press it out in front like you were doing a bench press, but obviously we're standing, so hands would still be outside shoulder width. And then if I take that and I pull it and I pull my elbows straight back until the PVC pipe's on my collarbone this way, and then
Yeah.
use my collarbone as the pivot point to rotate my hands around, it's probably not going to be perfect, but I would be willing to bet that it's going to be better. So even people with good front rack position or good mobility, if you will, or flexibility, however you want to describe that, can be fairly tough to just pull the bar straight down and then rotate around. But if I hold it out in front, full grip, pull my elbows straight back behind me, even if somebody's having a hard time visualizing this, think about what is it, the T pull on the crossover symmetry? I believe that's right.
Yes. Doesn't
Okay.
matter. More just like
Just,
a
yeah,
straight row to your top of your
to your
chest.
collarbone, right? To your collarbone. And then use your torso as the point for rotation to bring the hands around. And again, better is all I'm looking for. That's not a magical trick where they're gonna be like, oh my God, they're in the front row position. That's not what's gonna happen, but it will be better and it will help them get into a better position.
And for anybody listening, the goal of this would be like a gentle stretch. This should not be
Mm-hmm.
ripping, breaking. You said something interesting. You said flexibility or mobility. How do you differentiate? How do you distinguish the two?
Well, flexibility has more to do with the ability for my muscles to lengthen, right? Like that's probably how I would describe it. Mobility has a little bit more to do with things like that combined with what kind of range of motion is allowed at the joint, things of that nature. So I guess the easy way to describe it was like mobility is a more all-encompassing aspect of that. So you could be flexible, like you're pretty flexible, but I wouldn't describe you as having great mobility, right?
No,
Like
I
I
think
feel like that's
no,
an accurate statement, you know?
yeah, and I think that's kind of the difference. I think it was actually our friend Sarah Wilkinson. Her and I were talking about it. It's like, yeah, flexibility is the ability to lengthen your muscles, but mobility is basically your ability to get into the proper positions, right? So
I feel
the
like you just said what I just said. So, but
yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you 100%. But you're right. Like, and similar to me, I have found some of the worst squats. I don't want to generalize and get hate from people out there, but some of the worst squats I've ever seen have been from really good female yoga instructors.
The worst squats.
Most, and when I say worst, I typically mean immature. But I mean, I can
Hmm.
talk from like
Yeah,
even just girls I've dated in the past who tended to be like yogis and yoga instructors. Like they all had
flexy.
this, yeah, they all had the same squat, very immature.
I'm curious if that's because typically, and I am generalizing here, but not because it's a thing, right? Like if you look at that type of athlete who's very, very flexible, typically they would not carry as much lean muscle mass. right? And if I'm talking about lifting weights, I really don't want to be uber flexible. I want to be just flexible enough, right? Just flexible enough to get into it, to allow my muscles the length to get into a good position. So flexible and mobile.
And that's part of why people are anti-stretching, specifically static stretching, prior to working out, right? Like,
Yeah, a lot of that because I want some of that. I want to keep as much of that kind of elastic. I'm blanking on the term here, but the
yeah, but you're basically like that stretch reflex.
I want that stress. That's what I was looking for. That stress reflex, and I can't do that if I have excessive amounts of flexibility
It's
because
like we
it's
finish
really
each other's
sandwiches.
sentences.
the the if you can't create and hold tension and position, that's really bad for weightlifting, particularly if I'm going to try to change direction quickly for something like getting out of the bottom of a squat, a clean, or something like that, or something like a push jerk or push press. So we have rapid hip extension, rapid change of direction, and I want to be able to have enough. So, I've had athletes come in, females mostly, but told them, I'm like, you don't need to stretch anymore. Like if you continue to stretch, you will continue to struggle in these positions because they have no ability to be tight, for lack of better terms, in this position. Like you're
Yeah,
just
and that's why
too flexible.
it can be a problem to be too flexible. Like as
Yeah.
far as I know Dr. Sean from Active Life, who we're having on again, has been on a couple times, talks about that a lot. Where you need to be, and Kelly Starrett also spoken about it, where you need to be strong at your end range.
Yeah, and if you're too flexible, and there is no end range essentially, other than the true anatomical end range, where like if I go past that, like something breaks, you're probably too flexible.
Yeah. So we're talking about improving. I like your drill. I, I would recommend also PNF stretching for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And that's something
Correct.
I even demonstrate that a little bit at level ones. So the idea would be, say Fern's got PVC in the front rack. I kind of come under directly in front of him. I scoop my elbows under his triceps basically and give him something to push into, like actually resist, and then maybe 5 seconds relax, and then he can usually lift up a little higher, and you can do that even against J cups or J hooks
Hmm.
on your own.
I'm a fan of putting people under, I guess, what would be considered extreme tension, which is so if you put like your max front squat, so for you, we throw 100 pounds on the bar, and we get you
110,
underneath there.
110.
Okay, I'll give you 110, and have them get into the front rack position, and then just stand it up. Don't do anything with it. Just stand it up, and the focus for that 10 to 30 seconds, however long you think you can hold it, is really forcing the issue on the front rack position. So not only are we really, really putting some stress on the body while we're doing it, but that now we have like actual time under tension. So now I can work on what that feels like to really put my fingertips on the bar because I'm not worried about going through range of motion or any of that stuff. I'm just going to stand it up. I'm going to hold that position and drive my elbows up. Because there's no better way. There's nothing better to drive your elbows up against than 120% of your front rack or your front squat. Like you're going to
And
get some improvements there.
well, and inevitably throughout a level one or just with your athletes, I'm like, well, what about this stretch or that stretch or bands and distractions and all of that? And I'm like, to me, that's like a supplement. Like, and a supplement should be just that. It should be in addition to your good protocol or routine, be it nutrition or stretching. And nothing to me, we always say, like, hey, what's the best way to get warmed up for the air squat? Air squat. What's the best way to,
Hmm.
get better range of motion in the front squat? Front squat. And really what we're saying is improve that rack. And that's the homework I give. I love kind of the PNF thing that I spoke about, but then I'll tell people, find a load that allows you to accumulate maybe 3 minutes today. And when we say, I think what you're saying is the same as me, where it's not about, just keeping your elbows up. It's like, no, you're driving as hard as you can and really
Hmm.
pushing that limit. And then when you can do it with your max for 3 minutes, eventually the goal is back it down to 225, 135, 95 PVC.
Correct. Yeah. And knowing that some people are not going to get there. Like I've got some weightlifters in here who are never going to look like that in a PVC pipe. They also look really, really good under a barbell. And like at some point, yes, we have to acknowledge that like physically, the amount of muscle mass that this human being has on their body is not going to facilitate that without the addition of some outside force, be it a barbell or something like that. Most people don't fall in that category. Like we should just try to improve them in that position. Um, so yeah, I think people are just too real quick to punt to mobility. Be like, it's a mobility issue. And I'm like, maybe, maybe not. Like, let's find out. And if it is, that's fine. I'm not saying it isn't, but you haven't tried yet. So we can't confirm that.
Yeah, it, goes back to kind of that first statement there. Like, let's figure out what's at the root of this, figure out, and ultimately, kind of like the question we talk about in What is Fitness, like how much of anything do we need? Well,
Only enough.
yeah, only enough to improve work capacity across broad time and modal domains. So, for
You almost messed that up there. Yeah,
I
there's a
stumbled.
little hitch there. Yeah.
It's been a while. So, I think for a lot of people, they just kind of, again, it's like this band-aid solution of like, hey, you need more of this, where no, maybe you do need a little more mobility and maybe you need to move better.
Well, it's also just the idea that okay, maybe they do have. Let's just assume that they don't have a great position. Like that's a thing. That doesn't mean we can't practice it. Like why not? Like people don't want to do it because it's not fun. It's not cool. It sucks. It's not sexy. Nobody's like, oh man, that looks like a lot of fun. But that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and I think for most people, the front squat is so important in their training because it's not just a squat, front squat, it's your clean, it's your thruster, it's everything. And you know, you want to just lift more and get stronger, but you're just masking the problem. And if you can take the time and do these less sexy things, and they're not hours and hours, we're talking like, hey, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there, you're
Yeah.
gonna wind up moving so much better, lifting more, performing better, and improving your overall fitness.
Yeah, it doesn't think of it not necessarily. And the problem usually, in my experience, this person wants to do one massive dose and fix their problem. I'm going to spend an hour on my front rack position. I'm like, why don't you spend 3 minutes every day for the rest of your life doing that, and you'll get where you need to be.
Yeah, and that's just something, considering the time that we're living in, right? We want to create better habits, and the habit isn't like, hey, let's do this for an hour today and never again. Like you said, whether it's better front rack or wanting to read more or wanting to learn how to cook, it's like just do something small
Or
every
like the stuff
day.
that you've been putting out, which is, doing the 10-minute squat test. Like maybe you're not going to start 10 minutes. Maybe you just do 1 minute every day for a month, and then it's 2 minutes every day. And then it's finally you work up to 10 minutes.
Yeah, and really all you're trying to do is create those habits that allow you to be better, and be it in your ability to squat or anything else. All right, Fern, let's wrap it up. Any other last thoughts on this front rack mobility?
No, I think just as a coach, just check yourself on your willingness to punt to mobility in the front rack position. Again, this is not us saying that that's not a real scenario. It absolutely is. But just be conscious of how quickly you slap that problem onto somebody before you try to just put effort onto it first. Ideally, what we would like is both effort and working on it and then coming back to front rack position. So
Agreed. Nailed it. And we've talked about this before, but all the episodes of Best Hour of Their Day should be up on IGTV. Not all of them, I'm sorry. Episode one, we're doing one a week, but we've seen
dropping in.
dropping in. We're seeing more of the clips go up every day. So we're looking to hopefully get beyond this pandemic and get out for season two. But in the meantime, check it out on our YouTube channel. Check it out on our IGTV. And we're still waiting for that 200th review, Fern. It's not happened yet.
I'm going to talk to my mom and see if she'll just fill out 30 of them.
Seriously, Mrs. Fernandez, just give us a good review. All
Oh,
right. And
man.
again, if you have any feedback for me on learning history, I'm very interested. All right, Fern, I'll let you get back to whatever's going on at CrossFit Rife these days. I know Cassidy's in the background somewhere.
He is.
Are you guys social distancing? You're 6 feet apart.
We are 6 feet apart.
So I'm glad to hear it. All right, Fern. Well, it's been great chatting about this. I will talk to you later, and thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day, and thanks again to our special guest. We appreciate all you guys do for us with Best Hour of Their Day when it comes to sharing our posts on Instagram, when it comes to subscribing to us on YouTube, when it comes to the constant feedback. We are grateful and we appreciate it. We are trying to build a community based on coaching development and becoming the best version of yourself. And it goes without saying that we couldn't do without all of you. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Season 1 of Dropping In is out. We are getting tremendous feedback and we'd love for you to check it out. Leave us a comment on there. Head over to our Instagram. Give us a follow. Like our pictures. Feel free to share anything that resonates with you. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback for us, please don't hesitate. Email us besthouroftheirday@gmail.com. Thanks again. Until the next episode, we hope you've had the best hour of your day.